City FM 90.3. Nor are such statements necessarily supported or endorsed by the owners, managers, or advertisers of this station. While we encourage all to share their opinions, we do not support any comments that may slander, discriminate, or otherwise offend anyone, and we insist that you refrain from any such statements.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar Soda 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is the cancer man? No runner come out for war.
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to sugarcityfmsyncits.com or download Simple Radio app from the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear No Favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM. Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar Soda 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is the cancer man? No runner come out for war.
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to sugarcityfmsyncits.com or download Simple Radio app from the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear No Favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
Good evening and welcome to Fear No Favor. And this evening, I would like to look at some topics and subtopics. But before I do that, let me say happy belated birthday greetings to Zaya Nital over there in the Bronx. I think she had a whale of a time on Saturday with her mom and Newrish Nital and other family members. Now, I observed something last night. Zaya's mother and her auntie, my next daughter, they were attempting to teach us some mathematics. And the method might not have been the most conducive or simplistic way of doing it. So I had a slight intervention, but I think I will carry out my role in that respect, hopefully come weekend. Two of them are excellent in their academics, Nadia and Eurisha. I think Nadia would have graduated from Florida University quite recently, whereas her elder sister, Eurisha, would have graduated several times up to the master's level. So there are very high expectations of little Zaya. But regardless of how high the expectations are, you have to have them done incrementally because it cannot be a big jump. Yes, she is now 5 and she speaks well, but speaking and grasping mathematical concepts like chalk and cheese. But if you take your time and you massage it into her, she would eventually get there. So I'm going to use my years of experience when I taught Nadia and I taught Neurisha, so that they could have grasped the concept at a very early age. So I'm going to tell Zaya to be patient. Grandpa is coming to you with a nice method of teaching you those principles that your mom and your auntie were trying to instill in you. So just be a little patient and we'll get through that little semi-ordeal by now on Sunday evening. So belated birthday greetings to Newrish Nital, and I hope that you would continue to glow as you grow, and at the same time continue to maintain that strong discipline that you have and respect for elder persons, and I think that you'll be on the appropriate track. Your trajectory is looking great thus far, and of course projections can be made with the distance that you can take yourself once you continue to be disciplined and have, first of all, self-respect and respect for others. So good night to Zaya, Nadia, and Neurisha. I'd also like to say a special good night to my daughter Naliaka over there in Canada, and also to Anish over there in Molyneux, and Nayan, whom they claim is my younger twin brother over there in Molyneux as well. So we are going to get into our topics and subtopics, but let me express some disappointment here. There was the CSEC math exam, paper 2. Persons may recall, I think it was last year, that the paper 2, that's a big paper where you really have to put in some work. You use a calculator, your trigonometry, your sets, bearing, all those sort of stuff. The big paper, paper 2. And they had to cancel that paper last year because apparently there was a leak of that paper. In other words, certain persons in certain countries would have gotten information regarding that paper leaked by someone, somewhere, somehow. So it would not have been fair to count that paper to last year. Now, a few weeks ago, now this is this year, a few weeks ago, there were persons with rumors that paper 2, once again, was leaked. And that was just scaremongering, wishful thinking, because persons so want that paper to not to come, that they would say anything to put them at ease from a psychological perspective. It was confirmed by CXC that that paper was never leaked. But the reason persons are so wild to suggest that that paper 2 was leaked, they're looking for a situation like last year, where only the paper 1, that is the multiple choice, and the SBAs, or the alternative to SBA, would be counted. But it did not work. Now, my disappointment is this. The paper 2 came, and the students did the paper 2. Some of them claim that the paper 2 was rather difficult. Well, I did not see it before yesterday. And I went through question by question by question, all of them. And I do not see any difficulty associated with that paper. And I'm being objective. I know when a paper is challenging for persons at that level. My many years of experience with dealing with CSEC maths and other subjects, that paper was not difficult. The notion that persons were praying for the paper to leak and then cancel, that is what overwhelmed them. Now, some set of students somewhere would have drafted up a petition to indicate to CXC that the paper was too difficult. A paper can only be as difficult as your lack of preparation would manufacture that difficulty. Some people are ambitious. They want to achieve, but they do not want to put in the work that is necessary to get those achievements. And it is rather unfortunate because sometimes I find as well that students' preparation time is not respected. Some parents take their children and get them involved in many things. And they feel, well, it's just a one-off, and then you get another one-off, another one-off, another one-off. And they would add up. Not only would they be wasting precious hours, but then the frame of mind would take a while to get back into an equilibrium state to study. Just like JAMA, rumors, when you take time out of your studies and you're swarmed with dramatic conversations, it takes a while to cover from gossip. Because everyone who receives gossip is always thinking about a way to make that gossip even sweeter. Whether it is factual or fabricated, their effort is to make it sweeter before they continue the circulation. It takes time to recover. Your brain should just be focusing on the pertinent stuff that you have to do, especially when it comes to May and June, early June. You don't have time for distraction. You don't have time for contamination of your mindset. And some parents, but some of them would have never been in any exam room in the first place. Some of them overweight their children and feel, well, these children would be doing well because that is the impression that they're being given by the children. And that is okay. But there must be confirmation. If you think your child is in good shape for an examination, months before the examination, you ask the relevant person or persons who are preparing your children for exam. Ask them a few questions. And some of us, the content that the children are using to get the preparation, they're not familiar with the content. So they don't have a clue as to what's going on with the preparation. They just assume that all is going well, and sometimes it is not the case. They would never miss a church service. And some of these churches would have church 3 times, 4 times, 5 times per day. And it's just not Sundays anymore. It's almost like 8 days a week. Nothing is wrong with attending church, but you can develop a personal relationship with the Lord, and you can spend your time putting in the hours them. You don't have to go to every church service, every church activity. You have to work out and prioritize the ones that you would want to go to. And the parents then would have to work in unison with you. Because it's no use you working out, well, they have activities at the church 3 times today. And I'm going to all 3. Because the parents would make you go to all 3. Attending church is lovely. But sometimes the pressure that is placed on children, especially around exam time, to still attend church with the same frequency, they be counterproductive. Somebody might want to ask, so how could you be counterproductive when you're praising the Lord, that supreme being of which nothing greater can be perceived? But we have to understand, because the good Lord himself would understand if you're taking time out to build your foundation. Of course, you pray and you hope that he would grant you the energy and the direction and the comfort that is needed to pursue your exam preparation. But some parents just had, and some pastors and preachers, they don't have any conscience. They want the students them to be in church. They must be a part of the choir, a part of the drumming, a part of this, a part of that, a part of everything. And they too should know around what time of the year you have exams. And free up some hours from these students. Because, they don't want to be disrespectful to the parents or the grandparents or the guardian. They wouldn't want to be. So they must just tag along. And as a result of that, some of them just tag along and in church they're present but absent. Because their mind just not there. They are feeling as if they are being bullied. And we must just try to create that equilibrium. Yeah, you give church a few hours. You give your studies a few hours. You still have house chores to do. So we got to better serve our children when they're getting ready for exams. Unless things would be disastrous for quite a number of them. Just let the pastors let them have a conscience, man. Free up some hours for the children to study. And again, if you're home with devotion taking place, that devotion can go a long way. Some of us don't have devotion in our homes for years, never even did. You have your devotion, you read a scripture, you read one of those books that would explain certain things, give a story and tie in, integrate concepts of the Bible. And if you do that, it can go a long way. And sometimes the hours that you have to spend in church can be decreased to some extent. Why would somebody go to church for 5 hours? That person is that bad? 5 hours non-stop? I mean, come on, it is becoming ridiculous sometimes. You're coming home from church and you're tired, not even energy to eat. So the timetable you had for your preparation for your exams distorted considerably. Your energy sap. Because once you're in church and you're actively involved in church, even actively listening, it takes a lot of energy. Somebody must have a conscience. It would only last from May, June. But of course, maybe April you do your preparation and you breaking yourself to it. So when May and June come along, you're in good shape. And parents have to organize too. Some parents have the students looking after the younger siblings as if they belong to them. They are the parents. They want to go up and down the place and leave the oldest child to parent, carry your parental care on these younger siblings. You cannot walk like that. You're exhausting the children. And sometimes the places that you're going is of no significance per se and should not be more highly prioritized than you're looking after your own children. Stop transferring parenthood to the older children in the home. Sometimes they grow up, they're traumatized by it. They complain about it. But they ain't working anywhere. They ain't buying any clothes. They ain't buying any food. So it's either that they do it or they go hungry or they go without clothing. All of those things are operate on the children's mind from a psychological perspective. Carry your weight. Why you bringing children and you can't carry your weight to look after them? So that even the best of them cannot achieve the true potential because it is all the hours being taken up caring for their younger brothers and sisters. The first thing you got to do before you get children is to work out whether or not you got the time to look after the child, whether or not you have the means to look after the child. And if you find that they're not equating, then exercise the family planning structure. Put the formula into play. Can't bring children and then can't look after them. And then burden down those who are attending school. Some of them you have to stop from school to help you to accumulate sufficient to feed the younger ones because the fathers are not carrying out the role. That is tough. Very tough. And I'm saying that on the backdrop that persons were complaining that the exam paper to math was difficult. And to be honest, once you were prepared, a decent 2 or 1 should have been your reward. But if you did not push in sufficient time, for whatever reason, that is the only how papers do appear difficult when you sit in examinations. Lack of ample preparation. And then you have some persons who are doing several subjects. And they will study one subject until all the papers finish. But you see, the funny thing about that is that you might get paper 1. The paper 1's might be in June. You might get a paper 2. Some people might have paper 3. But you cannot study one subject until the examinations come to a completion for that one subject. You got to be studying a bit of each. A bit of each. You're doing 8 subjects, 9 subjects. You're doing 5 subjects. You got to spread your time. As a matter of fact, if during the term, the normal term leading up to your examination, you did a little piece every day, you wouldn't feel any pressure at all. You go in and do the exam and realize that you did not have to produce that last-minute effort. And by the way, what is surprising, you start preparing for the CSEC examination since in 3rd form. Those of you attending school in 3rd form, you continue in 4th, then in 5th. 5th should be mostly revision. But then you have some persons who are not attending school but attending classes. And most of the time they come to register for the exam in May, June, the September before. Just imagine, in school you take 3rd form, 4th form, 5th form. But persons want to register for exams out of school. They haven't done this subject in a long time. Sometimes they would have never done it before either. But they want to start to study just a few weeks, a few months before the exam. You want to register to do an exam, you must give yourself like a whole calendar year. A whole calendar year. You cannot come September and do exams in May, June. From September to May, June is not a year. You're looking at an academic school year from September to June, July. But you can't operate like that. You must know how much it would take from you to get prepared for an exam. And I don't think people are doing the calculations properly. Well, I already said that I don't believe in SBAs. And the reason being, persons could have the SBAs done by a lot of different persons. They don't have a clue of what was done on the SBA, and they could get a perfect mark for the SBA. Some parents are paying people to do the SBA for the children. And of course, because the teacher would give you back over and over, once you have somebody who knows what he or she is doing, they get almost a perfect score for all of them. And then all they have to concentrate on now is the paper 1 and the paper 2. But then when that person passes with a reasonable grade and you put them out into the work field where whatever they would have learned should be applied, they can't fit in because they never really did fully understand. If somebody did 75% of the work for them. And that is where the problem is. People are no longer helping people and guiding them through SBAs. They are instead doing the SBAs for them. So a perfect score, but if you were to quiz them on the SBAs that they would have done, they wouldn't have a clue. They can't get 10% because they were never really involved in doing it. Other persons did them for them. And that is where the problem is. You could see somebody really come through with a paper too. You could say, okay, what? 40 out of 50, 45 out of 50 for paper two? So regardless of the mark you would have gotten in the SBA or paper 3, you still feel confident that I know this. And you could apply yourself if given the opportunity to do so when you finish with school. So that petition about complaining and want people to sign up to say that the paper 2 was too hard, you have to add up all the time that you wasted when mommy took you here, took you there, took you everywhere, every action they have, every family, every weekend to visit somebody, dinner here, dinner there. When you could well eat and study at the same time, but you can't do it by other person's places. You have to sit down in the proper way, hold the fork in one hand, the knife in the next hand, and you're under so much pressure just to make sure you eat in the expected ways. All that is pressure mounting. You're home now, you take up a piece of potato salad, a piece of pie, put it in your mouth, and you pen in your next hand. You got a piece of chicken, drumstick, holding in your left hand, you're writing with your right hand. I mean, a few thing of gravy might end up on your book, but all that is part of it. But you can't walk with a book to study by nobody table when you're going. You got to create flexibility for the children and when they're doing the exam. So that petition, I'm just ashamed that it even started, and people will have to, in hindsight, see if they put in the necessary work. And if you don't put it in, like they say, if you fail to prepare, you got to prepare to fail. And that's it. Some people are ambitious. They want the subjects and they would like to get them as quickly as possible. But sometimes they're going to the exam room half prepared. Half prepared. You can't come September to do exam in May. It wouldn't happen. Yes, it could happen for some. But for you to be properly soaked in the content of the syllabus, you have to give yourself a sufficient stretch. If you know you want to do the exam next year, May, nothing wrong with you starting this May. Yeah, you start this May. And you give yourself a lot of months to be prepared. Understand the concept regardless of what they bring. You're ready. Some students seem as if they want you to tell them exactly what question. Not only the topics that CXC would bring, or CSEC. They want to know if you know the exact type of question that would be coming. And some of them even go further than that. They want to know if there's a way you can tell them precisely what would be on the paper. Well, that can't work, man. That absolutely cannot work. Let us take a break and come back.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar Soda 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is man? Where is the cancer Pandora? Come out for war.
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to SugarCityFMSankits.com or download Simple Radio app from the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear no your favor every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM. Fellow citizens, near and
Welcome back to Fear Now Favor. There is a subtopic that I would like to look at: manslaughter. We would have had some persons around here convicted of manslaughter, and they were of different circumstances at times. And it is a formulated opinion around here that once, even if you plead guilty to manslaughter, that based on what happened in the past where some person got 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, that you would get a light sentence. I just want to draw attention to it though, because some persons do not quite understand that you could get a maximum of life imprisonment for manslaughter. So, persons who feel that the manslaughter conviction, or even if you plead guilty to manslaughter, you'll get some very small penalties. That is not always the case. Each case would go on its own merit. Yes, manslaughter as opposed to murder. Murder, you could get the death sentence. Manslaughter, however, that would not be the case. But just as if you committed murder, you could get life imprisonment. The same thing you can do, you can get life imprisonment for manslaughter. You know, by the law of averages and everything else, you could look at it and say, well, manslaughter would always bring a lighter sentence. But that always is not key. It is not at the nucleus. It is at the discretion of the judge and, of course, circumstances surrounding the whole thing. It's done on merit, sort of merit basis. And also the history of the perpetrator. All those things will be taken into consideration when sentencing someone. And of course, you got the social inquiry report, everything. So it is not a must that if you plead guilty for manslaughter, that you'll get a mere 4, 5, 6, 7 years in imprisonment. It could go as far as life imprisonment. So just to erase that gray area, put it into distinct shades of black and white, there is a possibility that someone who even plead guilty for manslaughter could be sentenced to life imprisonment. Now, let us look at the 40-year maximum. Some persons are just discussing that as you get caught with a gun, you do something with a gun, 40 years in jail. They're not really taking it in a more logical way. You could get a maximum of 40 years. But 40 years could start with a 1-year sentence, a 2-year sentence, 10-year, 15, 20-year sentence. But the judge cannot give you more than 40 years. That's the maximum. Some persons would have indicated that in an effort for the government to give that penalty more, that law more teeth, is that they should have created a minimum. And yes, a lot of people would think like that. So, well, boy, if you caught with a gun, you get a minimum of 15 years. You're going to be off the street for 15 years. but that is unconstitutional. You cannot set a minimum number of years imprisonment for any perpetrator, anybody convicted of a crime. Because when you do that, you're taking away the discretion from the judge as to what he can do. Because suppose you set a minimum of 15 years in jail, a maximum of 40. You might have a situation where a judge would think that the person deserves 9 years, 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, but certainly not 15. But 15 is the minimum. So you're forcing the judge's hand. You're taking away the discretion from the judge. So you could set a maximum, of course, you could play from 1 up to 40. 1 up to 40. That's good discretion. Could exercise that. But that doesn't say that he will sentence you above the previous maximum. Because that is what people hoping for. If the maximum was 15, you're saying that when you have your new law and you cap the maximum to 40, nobody should get less than the 15-year minimum. But you cannot impose or you cannot legislate a minimum. It is unconstitutional. That cannot happen. So therefore, whatever flexibility the judges or the other adjudicator would have, they have from 0, well, let me say from a little more than 0 up to 40 years. Now, there's also a misconception there, because as I listen the gentleman in Parliament carrying out that debate, and then the comments after and the input to the debate from other members of the House, they are indicating that if you want to take the risk and spend 40 years of your lifetime in jail, then get caught with a gun. Don't follow the amnesty. But the problem is that there's a misconception. Even those who are legislating, they are failing to realize, some of them are failing to realize that if somebody gets 40 years, a 40-year sentence, that person is not spending 40 years in jail. And some people, unfortunately, even some of those who are legislating, do not quite understand the sentencing principle. If you sentence a man, let us suppose a judge decide to exercise his discretion and give somebody 40 years in jail as the penalty. That person is spending any 40 years in jail. The person would be spending 26 years and 8 months, because it's 2/3. A prison year is 8 months. So a third would not go to the incarceration. If you really want to sentence somebody to 40 years in prison, you'd have to give them a 60-year sentence. A 60-year sentence would mean that they will spend 2/3 of that incarcerated. So that is how the 40 would come about. But a 40-year sentence is 26 years and 8 months. But you still have to consider that even though you might have sentenced somebody to 40 years, 26 years and 8 months, there's always a possibility that the person could exhibit good industry, good discipline, become a model prisoner. And at certain times of the year, inmates are given discounts, like maybe some occasion, 45th anniversary of independence, whichever one, something, even Christmas, you'll give them some time off. So whatever time they have remaining, you'll take it out of that. And you don't take it out of the sentence. You take it out of the time that they should be incarcerated for, like the 26 years and 8 months that the 40 years would come down to. if somebody gets 2 years off, you're not going to take it from the 40 years. You're going to take it from the 26 years and 8 months. So the 3 years would come off. If it's 3 years discount they're getting, it will come off. So 26 and 8 months will come down to 23 years and 8 months. Once you are incarcerated, the prison law would step in. They have something they call remission. They take off a third. Okay? So we must be mindful of that. Somebody could show good industry, working hard, become a model inmate. Instead of looking at people planning fight and doing all sort of stuff, you be like a peacemaker. When the time comes and recommendations are made, then you could well get some discount on the number of years. As a matter of fact, something that our prison seem not to be keen on doing, but is a part of the law. When you're serving a long sentence, you are supposed to be taken down for review every 4 years. And somehow that wasn't taking place. I don't know if it is taking place now and if it was started, if it is continuing. But when you're serving a long sentence, every 4 years you're supposed to be taken for a review, a judicial review or administrative review, wherever they want to categorize it as. And then they could decide, okay, all reports from the officers and maybe even somebody who might have done a report to present to the court would suggest that this person was sentenced to 40 years, but I think that it can be reduced. The person is doing well, they're contributing to positivity within the environment, they're causing a lot of people to go through metamorphosis, changing their ways, making 180 degrees turn, and it could be recommended that the person get early release. Some of the years can come off, all those sort of stuff. So the 40-year sentence is not 40 years. Had they wanted to be 40 years, incarcerated, barring the discount and so people could get, it would have had to be 60 years. 26 years, 8 months, 2/3 of 40. So that to just put a little bit of light on that. And 40-year maximum doesn't mean everyone who is caught with a weapon of the description or under the particular law and the penalty would get 40 years. Could be 30, could be 25, could be whatever. And then adjustments would have to be made when they are incarcerated. And again, it depends on the history of the individual. Because if you have a rap sheet, meaning that you were to prison several times, you recidivated a number of times, and you have a lot of convictions on your street from your history, you and somebody might be jointly charged, to put it equal, jointly charged for a particular crime involving a gun. And you who got the long rap sheet could get 20 years, whereas somebody who might have been there for the first time might just get 8 years, 10 years. There is nothing that says that because you're jointly charged, both of you have to get suffer the same penalty. Because if one is of good character, prior to that particular event, the good character would come into consideration. And the good character basically said that somebody of good character is less likely to commit the crime, especially the one with which he is charged. And a good character, they got the credibility and they got the propensity. Credibility means somebody of good character is more likely to be believed than somebody of bad character. So that's the credibility arm of the good character. And then the propensity now would say that a person with good character has less of a propensity or less likely to commit the crime, especially the one that the person is being charged for. So a lot of things you have to consider. I only wish that we could have a lot of programs like these really explaining the law and sentencing and those stuff to people. And again, somebody could get leniency. The Governor General could forgive somebody. So you could sentence somebody for 40 years this morning, and by next week, the person is out of prison because they were granted that action from the Governor General. Right? Okay. Now, let us look at the gun amnesty. Let us take a break, and when we come back, we'll look at the gun amnesty.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar Soda 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is fun? Where is the cancer man? No runner come out for war.
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to SugarCityFMSankits.com or download Simple Radio app from the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear No Favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
Welcome back to Fear No Favor. We are now going to look at the existing gun amnesty. I think it was declared from the 10th of May to the 25th of May, both days inclusive. So the 10th of May, 2024 to the 25th of May, I think, 2024. Now, my understanding of the amnesty, as it was explained, was that if you are in possession of any weapon, any gun and ammunition, you can have that weapon turned in to the police. They would have indicated that even if you don't want to take it directly, you can take it to a lawyer who can immediately thereafter hand it over to the police, law enforcement. Now, they also indicated that there is no risk of you being charged for possession of that particular weapon or set of weapons that you turned in. But something that is lingering in the minds of some, if that gun has on a body on it, meaning that it was used to kill somebody, murder somebody, and it was exposed to forensic analysis, and it was proven that that gun has a body on it. Let us suppose, for whatever reason, you were able to track that particular gun, even though we are saying that they would not even be taking any notes, any record as to who brought in what. They have persons with good memory, you got people with psychology. They might be aware, let us just suppose, working on the supposition that they were able to trace this particular gun to Mr. A. And also they were able, through forensic, to indicate or to realize that this particular gun that was in A's possession was used to commit a crime. Are we saying that all that will just go through the window because, as promised, there would be no prosecution for anything in relation to that gun? Or are you saying that there will be no prosecution for the possession of that illegal weapon? Okay, let us suppose that there would be no furtherance of any charges with respect to the possession. Somebody might ask, well, you're not charging them for the possession, but if it is crystal clear that this weapon was used to commit a murder, could you still charge that person in connection to that murder? Because then you would need something of evidential value, and that weapon would be of evidential value. But then if you stated in Parliament that there is zero probability of you being prosecuted for anything regarding that weapon, some people say just the possession, but could the possession be separated from the execution of the crime? Because most of the time, the most important thing is to find that weapon, prove that that was the weapon that was utilized in the committing of the murder, and to also, where you prove that the ammunition would have come from that weapon. Even if that is, somebody might say, well, even if that is the case, how could you go now and collect other information of evidential value to corroborate your main stance there? That yes, this was the weapon. Yes, this was that. The fingerprint, the gun would have gone through 1,000 hands before. Right? But let us suppose this one is fresh. Okay, we had some shooting recently. Suppose weapon from those shootings were to end up in the police custody. Is the amnesty applicable with respect to that weapon? But you would say no, the amnesty might not be applicable because they did not return or turn in the weapon. So the amnesty might only be on weapons that were turned in, voluntarily turned in. But I don't know if you could just say voluntarily alone, because you might not be willing to turn in a weapon, and against the grain of voluntariness, you turn it in still, so it was involuntarily turned in. Somebody took it in on your behalf. Now, what's the difference? Okay, somebody convinced you to turn it in. Now, let us suppose that your property was searched and the weapon was found during the amnesty period. Maybe you had intentions of turning it in, but you just couldn't get around to executing that particular course of action. So the police, law enforcement bounce upon you before you get a chance to turn it in, and the weapon was found. Would the amnesty be applicable to a weapon that was found on somebody's property by law enforcement who went to search? Because you could have gone to search somebody's place upon getting a little hint from somebody. Somebody might have said, look, but I don't want to turn in this weapon, But the neighbor might know of it, and they don't want to turn it in for you either. So they give you some information, about the weapon and maybe its location, a little neighborly, they change, they exchange secrets or whatever. And the police went just upon that information provided by the neighbor. Technically, an attempt to turn in the weapon might have been purging along, but the eventuality did not happen, and law enforcement bounced up on that weapon. Could the amnesty be applied in that situation? Or could the amnesty be applied in any situation where guns were found on somebody's compound? You know, they go to a house and they find a weapon. If 6 people in there, the 6 of them going on the station. And unless somebody takes responsibility for the possession of that weapon, as it was found on the compound, all 6 will be charged. Most of the time you have somebody coming through and taking responsibility. So how would you now deal between now and the 25th? How would you deal with weapons that were actually found on people's property before they would have gotten a chance to turn in the weapon? Would possession still be an issue? Or because that they came and they found it before you were able to voluntarily give it over? There are some serious questions to be asked. But the key thing is that if you have a weapon or weapons you have between now and the 25th, and you had between the 10th and the 25th to make up your mind as to whether you'll risk staying in possession of it or you're going to calculatedly give in the weapon. That is a question that a scenario that would have to be put out there. Everybody, I think everybody in the entire federation would like persons who have illegal firearms to turn them in during the period of amnesty, because you don't want them to be punished, you don't want them to be prosecuted. But there's a little complexity with it too. Let us suppose that the law enforcement was able to go to every environment with an illegal weapon and take up all, A-L-L-L-L, all those weapons. Level playing field, all the weapons them gone. That would have been something excellent. But the reality is nice to be positive, but it's better to be realistic. The reality is that might never happen. Because even though we had a peace, you had some persons who were just not in favor of the peace. You had some persons who trust was eroded to such an extent that they would not even trust certain people. So as a result of that, they prefer to hold on the protection. Of course, it is risky. You can be caught with it and you can suffer severe penalties. But I'm just saying some of the thoughts that would go through a person's mind. If I am to talk to anybody in possession of illegal weapon, I'll ask them to give it in. Give in the illegal weapon. But there's more that persons would have to internalize. And like I said before, if it was possible, highly probable, that all illegal weapons could have been collected by law enforcement. Because you have some things that go through people's head. When they don't give up mine, what happened? What about when he who I beefing with didn't give up his? You have left me naked. That might be a perception rolling through the minds of persons. Persons might be willing, but their thing is, but I'm willing to give up this. What about Peter Cross there? And Susan? Because females in it too. And Susan over there. Are they giving up theirs? And they say, when I don't give it up now, I walk. I got to be walking with 4 eyes, 2 in front, 2 behind. Because I'm not certain as to whether Susan and the other guy out there gave up theirs. It could be a difficult decision. But those of us who are into psychology and into therapy, we can help massage persons into parting with these weapons. Something you have to ask a lot of questions. Who are you beefing with? Okay, A beefing with B. Okay, then could we now go across by B? B, we understand you have this particular weapon. A has this particular weapon. Could you give us this? And A would give us that. So the 2 weapons them off the street. We trust and hope that a good amount of illegal weapons, if not all, could be given up off our streets. A good amount. A mistake that the previous administration made, a big mistake, in my opinion, from a psychological perspective. They counted the weapons that were given up and they publicized it. I would like to appeal to the current administration never ever to do that. Maybe you think that you can do some politicking with respect to the numbers that you might take off the street. It is not a good idea to publicize that. And I'll tell you why. Most persons who are beefing, they sort of have ideas of where guns are and who are in possession of those guns. Now, if they're in the calculations, work out that there are 50 guns in total across the various communities. And due to the amnesty, you picked up 30 out of the 50. And you go and you publicize that. Obviously, the matter is not difficult. There would be a way that 20 more weapons out there. And you would wonder, well, okay, they know it's 20, 30 from 50 is 20. But would they know where those weapons are most likely to be? And the answer could be yes. Because remember that these persons are not downright warring each other. And conversations would take place. So they must know that this 20 would be in district, this district, that community. So they have an idea. And then those who gave up the 30 might psychologically feel a way to see that they thought that everybody was on board in giving up their illegal weapons. So if you don't mention how much, nobody will start to speculate and calculate as to where the other 20 weapons could be. Because they would not know whether you collected 49, 48, only 8, 18, 28, 10, 12, and they would not be obliged to do any mathematical calculations to convince themselves that they have an idea where the difference would be and in which community and in whose possession. Because sometimes they go as far as to, amongst law enforcement, to tell you who brought in and who brought in what. And that is ridiculous. Something like enforcement who you're supposed to trust not to put certain information into the public's domain. They are the one who would breach, and that is where the intense calculation, logical reasoning would start. And we have to be mindful that situations like this amnesty, you must not have any and everybody talking to it and being an integral part of the precise calculations as to how many guns were collected and from whom. That should be of strict confidentiality, unless you could be creating a problem in the public's domain. There are certain persons you hear talking with authority with respect to policing affairs. And even within the police force, there are certain persons who should know information that others do not know about. You know, it is amazing. My dad was a police for 36 years. And he would always say, if you're in conversation with 3 other persons, you better believe that one of them are there representing the enemies or the opposition, regardless of their rank. Regardless of their rank. You would be in a meeting with 2 other police officers trying to strategize for a potential perpetrator. And after you done plan everything, the perpetrator has information that you'll be coming on them 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock. Where the hell the information came from? All the 3 of you were in the meeting. Those are things that our society would have to purge itself of. We must try to be law-abiding citizens, try to keep on the straight and narrow, that anything about you could be done on local television. Nobody has any skeleton in any cupboard for you unless they take advantage of you. And we have to work on that. Now, there are some people who might give up their weapons willingly or with some resistance, and as such might not feel comfortable remaining in the same environment. Some of them might want to go overseas. And this is where the complexity could become a bit more complex or even complicated. Because if you give up your weapon, or when you give up your weapon, you're left, so to speak, naked. Terminology on the street. You're left naked. You are not certain whether other persons gave up their weapons within the amnesty period, or whether or not they give it up at all. Because of that degree of suspense, you might walk out with your family members and maybe close friends that it is better for you to migrate to another land. But in your quest to migrate, you do not have such flexibility because you have a criminal record. Now the question is, how can these people who are maybe in suspense as to what might be coming their way, how can they be accommodated, facilitated? because they might not feel safe around here anymore, any longer, could something be done to afford them the flexibility to travel? Each case, of course, would have to be taken on its own merit, because there are rules and laws as to how criminal records can be expunged. And I don't know if, consistent with those laws or policies or stipulations, whether or not many of them would qualify for having the record expunged with some degree of speed. And that too might be a consideration. I can't fit in this thing anymore. I am not in a position to beef with protection. So therefore I want to leave. What can be done to facilitate those who would like to leave? That is a very integral question that somebody would have to try to address. Somebody asked a question about whether or not I think they should be paying people to give in the weapons, because the person made reference to either Canada or England, where persons were paid for guns when they brought them in. That's a period of amnesty. So they did not only stand the probability of being prosecuted, they were void of that, but they were compensated for the weapons when they took them in. Oh, that is a sort of problematic area. Because the first thing the guys would tell you, that they spent money purchasing their weapons. That might be true, it might not be true. If you were to do an investigation to find out how much on average the average weapon cost, you might come up with about $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. You have weapons cost $15,000, $20,000. Now, if a guy was desperate enough for protection and he purchased a weapon for $15,000, what I'm hearing is that they would like to be compensated for the money they spent on that weapon when they give it in. One school of thought would suggest that it might not be a good idea to start paying people to bring in their weapons. And maybe the reason for that is that from the time you start to pay for persons to bring in their weapons, there's a very high probability that you could initiate a trade, a gun trade, without even realizing it. Inadvertently initiate a gun trade. Because if I know if I give in a particular gun, I'm going to get 15,000. What would stop me from getting 6 more guns of that nature? I'm talking about during the amnesty period. You never know when amnesty will come out again. But I'm saying if that arrangement, similar to the arrangement in the country that they were talking about, 15,000 for a gun if you bring it in, and they could get 6 of that, that's $90,000. $90,000. So there is that subtle possibility. If monies are paid for guns that are returned, it can result in a gun trade inadvertently. And you have persons out there smart enough to do the calculations. And you have to understand that our borders are very, very porous. So once you start that compensation for weapon through amnesty, it could be a proliferation of even more guns coming in for people to trade in and get money from those transactions. You have some who are desperately in need of the monies back. I spent 10, 15,000 on two weapons, that's 25,000. That's like a bank account for me. You want my weapon, give me 25,000. I part with my weapon, I done with my beef, me ain't got nothing to do with nobody got nothing to do with me. I good, let's move on. Or give me 25,000, help me get a ticket, go out there, someplace, at least I have a start, have a little $25,000 in my pocket, I could get converted to 10,000 US, and at least I have a start until better can be done. But even how am I going to get out there without having that flexibility to travel? I am tagged with Interpol. I might try to travel. Interpol got me tagged, so they stop me when I reach a certain destination and send me back. What is the wholesome approach to all this? What is the wholesome approach to expunging some person's record and giving them the flexibility to leave? Because there are two ways, One of the ways to prevent persons from beefing in such violent ways is to take them out of the environment, where they must be facilitated to get out of the environment. And if I can travel, where am I going to go? 68 square miles, going around in concentric circles. I need the flexibility to get out. So I must not be left in a vulnerable situation where all of my efforts to migrate is stagnated. Maybe there's a bigger picture, bigger planning. And even those that are flagged by Interpol for whatever reason, all those things would have to come under that integration table. Find that derivative, free up people. Those are further consideration. Maybe the amnesty is the first step. But something I think I heard the government had intentions of doing is to consider expunging records. Because you have some places people can go despite having a criminal record, but having reached there, they cannot get any meaningful employment. Because there is restriction based on the fact that they have a criminal record. If that restriction is removed for the purpose of increasing the probability of them being gainfully employed, that would go a long way. But if that restriction is maintained, and despite migrating, they are still having problems to get a decent job, even some of them willing to work very hard, but they're not getting that flexibility that they need. What can be done? Because if they were forced to leave, they would have to survive when they go to the newly found home. And if it cannot be done in the legal way, because it's a matter of survival, it might take illegal actions to keep them afloat. And then getting involved in those illegal actions and they're getting caught, convicted, the only place they could end up is back in their hometown. You can't stop somebody from coming home. So it is a deeper situation that we have to look at. Yes, the amnesty is a good start, but there are some who would like to migrate. and get away from the paranoia of being attacked by people because they might have given in their weapons and others might not have. Paranoia could cause people to flip. And somebody who might have given up a weapon because they are saturated with this paranoia, the defense mechanism would indicate to them that, but I would have to rearm myself, which would be a very sad situation for our society. Because we would not want anybody to be giving up weapon, and because of whatever situation, not being conducive to them, and they internalizing whatever they internalizing that they think would adversely impact their well-being, their livelihood, their very existence, they might be tempted to do something that we work so hard to get them to depart from. This got to be holistic. Got to be holistic. And sometimes the best way to effectuate the good working of law enforcement is not to bully, is to massage. And once that massaging takes place, it could become very easy to work with persons who might be troubled. You try to bully, they build up resistance. And the more the degree of bullying is, the stronger the resistance. And it could reach a stage where it's you versus them. Because it would stop being them versus each other, you know. It could shift around. Because all of them could be frustrated to a point where they put their ideas together, they realize that they're being attacked, they're being bullied, and they could formulate something and they end up with a polarization. You versus them. We don't want to ever reach a situation like that in this small place. So we are saying massage the individuals. It can happen. Some people like to be at the center of getting something done, but they don't have what it takes to do it. Those are the ones who will try to bully their way. And not because the law gives you the authority and the power to do certain things. You must always want to utilize it to its maximum. They have something called optimum. And if you just create that optimum situation where you can establish an equilibrium as to how to deal with these people, we will get more done than to bully these people and causing the resistance to go up in a proportionate way. It would lead to polarization eventually. And polarization would be a situation that none of us, not even them who feel that they could defend themselves, would really want. So I'm appealing to get all those factors considered and let us see how best we can massage these troubled persons or persons with challenges. Afford them the therapy and get them more relaxed above their shoulders that they can make better decisions and see the future projection change the line of trajectory and let them know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. But that is only one aspect. Everybody would like to see that light at the end of the tunnel. But by God, it must not be a light of a train that is out of control. It is not every light you see at the end of a tunnel is indicative of hope. If that train is out of control, that light would bear absolutely no significance. So let the light at the end of the tunnel be recognized as a symbol of hope, rather than a train that is out of control, and initiating steps that can be proliferated to more dangerous situations for our society as a whole. Just think about it. And anybody else who has ideas that they feel can be utilized and collectively create the environment that is more conducive for our survival. We don't want to be a people who are just merely existing. We don't want that. We want to be living. Some people say from the time you're born, you're on your way to dying. I see it differently. I have done several eulogies for persons, and I would have indicated in one of them that dash, the hyphen, that dash is the most significant aspects. Is the most significant aspect of a person being on earth. When you see from 1954 to dash to 2024, 54, 46, that's 2000, 46 plus 24, that's about what, 70? That dash between there, how did you take control of that dash? The two ends are just extremities, one the beginning, one the end. But that dash, the journey, that life journey, what is the value of that dash between 1994 and 2024? That journey is what talk about the value, your legacy, what you're going to have your children inherit, what baton you're going to pass on. That dash is the most important aspect of that funeral booklet. All of us should want to anticipate that our dash would have the highest possible value. Just start seeing that dash as the most important thing of your life journey. Let us take a break and come back.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar City 90.3 for Fear Nor Favor.
Where is one? Where is the cancer man? No runner come out for war.
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to SugarCityFMSaintKitts.com or download Simple Radio app from the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your calls. Fear Nor Favor every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
children's future dwindling, creating much disillusion. Or would we watch on idly, disregarding our self-sufficiency? Maladministration, wrecking all and no. I said no, not that wrong. Citizens, let's unite and stand up for rights all our lives and our lives. Let us reintegrate and correct our mistakes. Reunification, building a brand new nation. We'll move on together hand in hand. Rise, citizens, arise. The country is yours, all yours, still yours.
Welcome back to Fear in Our Favor. Just in the interim, shouting out Nyan. I know he's usually listening to his daddy on this program. He's always giving me feedback. And as a 12-year-old, I always tell people, you're never too young to understand what's going on in your island. And I'm very happy that he has made up his mind to be a part of every single program that I put out there. Even when there is a repetition, he would call and ask me, why is that program being repeated? And I told him it was by popular request, because he's always looking forward to a new program every Thursday. And I'm very happy that he's listening. I'm happy that my daughter in Canada, Naliaka, she listens as well. And very often as well, Newrish would listen. That is when she's not too tired dealing with her daughter. But it's nice when you have your children listening, because if you can give out information there that is meant to at least help in the guidance of your country, your children would be a part of that aspect. And I think any parent job is to make that life gradient a little less steep than the one that they had to go through. And whatever I can to make life's gradient less steep than the one I went through for my kids and others, by extension, I would happily do that. And those of us who know better should do better. And I'm appealing to others to come on board and assist in our nation's quest to improve the livelihood of those who occupy the 68 square miles. Okay, now I have to move on to the Keyon area. The Keyon area. Now, water is a little more available in the Keyon area. And I believe that as Kittitians, we have to start counting our blessings instead of praying for mishaps and just be aware that that supreme being, of which nothing greater can be perceived, he does not answer negative prayers. We must all be consistently happy for others and the improvement they go through, whether it's on an incremental basis or whether it was an occasion of sublimation where you could go from one state to the other with a jump. And people were suffering severely from the lack of water, adequate supply of water. Just like any of us, sometimes there is no control over that. Because we could build storage tank, we could buy storage tank, we could have the biggest storage, water storage facility. If rain doesn't come, there would be nothing to go in storage. I think the people of Keon is a set of resilient people, and we must all be happy for them. The incremental improvement in the water condition should bring smiles to their faces. And when you see them involved in conversations, to tell them how happy you are for the fact that a more concerted effort was made to materialize the improvement in the water supply in Keon. As a very young person, I worked in the Keon area. My first job was at the Keon High School, where I taught history. And then I really couldn't take on the start of writing the notes on the board. So I quickly shifted to teach commerce and accounts. And then after I went to university and came back, I went back. Now, before leaving for university, I went to manage the Hermitage Spooners estate. And then after I came back from studying, I went back to Keon High School to teach maths and chemistry. So I would have taught 5 subjects at Keon High School. But my time of living there as a manager for Spooners and Hermitage estates, the water system was horrible. Horrible to the extent that I had to shower by dipping up water. And on the very odd occasions, water would come from the pipe. But in order to safeguard against that, you had persons like Sheep and Shine and Jabuk who would have bought a water tank to my compound to ensure that I had water on a daily basis. So that problem in Keon with water is a long-standing problem. For too long, that was going on. Way, way, way too long. And through previous administrations, I think that it was taken for granted because the Keon people were not complaining as they ought to. Maybe even demonstrating. I've never seen a demonstration in Keon with respect to a water situation that went from bad to worse, and maybe from worse to the worst it could have ever been. And not one demonstration. People had to learn to get up and demonstrate for what they want. Because I believe had that been done years ago, they would not have been in that position that they were in recent years. Now, the Dr. Joe administration, they made a concerted effort to assist in ameliorating the condition with respect to water supply in the Keyon area. They were very calculating, they were deliberate, they were intentional, that they want water to be a positive part, or part of the positive conversation in Keyon. And they would have gone, established a well field, dug some wells, and they realized that water was available. But having water available is only one thing. You have to eventually get it to the people. And I think I was saying about 500,000 gallons per day. But even before you put a well in place, you have to carry out some tests. And apparently that was done because this was all part of the delay too. It might have come sooner rather than at the time when it came just the other day. But we are still grateful. We are grateful to those who produce the effort. All the pertinent stakeholders would know who they are. The testing would have involved pump, apparently, that could have only deliver 100,000 gallons per day. Now, a pump that delivers 100,000 gallons a day being tested for a few hours were far from appropriate for the correct testing, because you had to test the integrity of the pipes, whether or not they could withstand the pressure from the 500,000 gallons per day efforts. Nowhere a pumping 100,000 could give you a correct indication of the integrity of a piping that's supposed to be managing and facilitating 500,000 gallons per day. So the test was carried out on the 100,000 gallons per day. And it was positive for that particular type of pump. But then they had to actually get the real pump. And the real pump would have been the one that can pump 500,000 gallons per day. So there was a delay. Dimensions would have to be taken, this, that, and customized and sent back to St. Kitts and then be installed, and then you had to run the test again, because when you're running the test, you have to do it for 72 hours. Not just a few hours like they did the one for the 100,000 gallons per day. This was the real test. And the real test was favorable in that the 500,000 gallons per day, the test was over a 3-day period. The integrity of the pipes were established and confirmed that they could withstand the pressure of 500,000 gallons per day. And then you would have had maybe the more like qualitative aspect of the testing. It is my understanding that some water, the various samples, would have been sent to the appropriate laboratories, and there was returned in a favorable position where the water could have been consumed by the people in the vicinity of Keyon, in and around the vicinity of Keyon. Now, that is a blessing. And to me, we should start counting our blessings more. Yes, everything would not be perfect. Everything would not be done the way each person would have liked it to be done. But in some cases, when it was not done, there were certain persons would have liked, then they give the impression that all cannot be well, all cannot be even reasonably well, because it was not done the way they wanted it. And even if you spoke for about 10 persons in the Keon area, out of a population of many times 10, they feel like that was representative of the area in putting the perception of Keon people out there. But I just want to appeal to Keon people. You have long been suffering from a water supply issue. Embrace the blessing that would have come your way. And of course, you have persons in Keon who can go to the authorities and say, look, we are happy for the quantity of water that we are now getting, the consistency, but we have a little concern over the quality. And they could just produce the results and show you. But you see, when we elect people who we think can stand up and represent us in an ethical way. Because not every decision they make, they can actually come back to the general population and have consultation. Because if we are going to pick people, elect people to represent us, and before they make every decision, they have to come back to us. So we who hire them as our servant, we have to micromanage everything that they do. That is not good for governance. You're supposed to have some confidence in the people that you elected to represent you. All of us, whether you voted for them or not, there is some degree of flexibility that must be granted to these people, that they are doing things within the best interest of all, not just some, of all. Despite you might have the statistical outlier of persons who would want to influence you a certain way into not believing that that is done, that would be just be proven as a statistical outlier. And that is why I say we have to count our blessing. Stop looking for loopholes. Count our blessing and hope that whatever we have, my philosophy is do the best with what you have until better can be done. Accept what you have, and if incrementally it can be improved to the betterment of the greatest number of people, you do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. If that can be accomplished, despite, albeit incrementally, let us be happy. Let us be happy. We are going to experience water issues for many years to come because we don't have any control over the climate change that is going to happen. We are willing to go into supplemental water supply by doing the desalination, and that is an excellent idea. But guess what? Desalination will call for a lot of electricity. Already, the water department is the greatest user consumer of our electricity. And a lot of people do not understand that. They see water over there and electricity over. It doesn't go like that. The water would have to be pumped to the various places to get a good distribution. So already the water department, water system, is the highest consumer of electricity in our St. Kitts, our federation. Now, if we were to go into desalination would need a lot of electricity too. The last conversation I would have heard from Mr. William, the general manager for the electricity department, basically, I got this basically that we're just breaking even with respect to supply and demand. That we just had sufficient supply to deal with the current demand. And that is going to go up. We're building homes, hotels, this, that. So the demand would go up. And the supply is not moving in a proportionate way. And actions would have to be taken for the supply to be increased one way or the other. But resting that aside, the plan to bring the desalination plants on board would call for a lot of electricity. A lot. Some people talk about solar energy in order to be the engine of the desalination plant. If we only know the size of solar electricity fields that we would need to have it play a substantial role in the operation of the desalination plant, I don't believe we got an acreage of land to do that. We don't have the acreage of land to do that as much as we could have solar energy helping us with our homes and everything else, to have it as at the nucleus of creating water, producing water from desalination plant. It can't happen just like that. It is deeper than that. Much, much, much deeper than that. But I think too that if people get peace within themselves, regardless of the challenges on the outside and the perception created, the calculated perception constructed by others, if you have peace inside, you'd relish a half cup of water twice as much as you would relish a full cup of water. God, if you understand the overall circumstances, the effort that is being made, how much you can relish that half cup of water compared to a full cup of water. It's just for you to have the proper mindset. But if persons are consistently, continually putting in your mind that you should not have no half cup of water, you should be having a full cup of water, despite the flexibility in the supply, that is setting you up to be traumatized. The reality is that the water condition is not going to get much better over the next 5, 10 years, maybe 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. We got to make up our mind that there would always be a limited supply of water based on climate change alone. We just have to change our habits, the way we use water and misuse water and abuse water. I always say a bad habit is like a soft and comfortable bed, easy to get into and hard to get out of. If you could change that mindset and incrementally erode that bad habit, it just comforting, it just inner peace. You will get that inner peace to live with the changes that are coming onto us over the incremental years to come. We can't do much about it. We cannot do much about it. All we can do is prepare and have something supplemental. But having a supplemental source of water doesn't mean that you should waste what you have. Doesn't mean that. But at the same time, as you go into storage, you have to be mindful that you got to be mindful of the quality of that water that you're trying to store. You got to be mindful. So let us be grateful. Let us ask. Let us show thanks to the Almighty for at least having a water source that can supply the people of Keyon 500,000 gallons per day, the appropriate pumps in place, the lines in place, and you can look at Keyon people and see they're looking more radiant. That is from inner peace. It's inner peace that radiates on the outside and causes you to glow. You cannot have inner disturbance and your glow on the outside is not going to happen. Any genuine, if you're glowing from the outside and you got inner disturbance, that is a show you're putting on. That is a show. It's like you're going to work in the tourism industry and you experiencing some excruciating belly pains, but the person that approach you and you got to produce the brightest smile you ever had produced before, despite the pains on your inside. So when you're glowing from the inside, it's because of inner peace. Not that you become complacent, because you're still trying, but at least at that particular juncture, the inner peace is what would cause you to, it would be radiated on the outside, and you would glow accordingly. Don't let anybody steal your inner peace. Regardless of what constructed perception they put in the public's domain within the decibel of your hearing, do not let them disturb your inner peace. When your inner peace is disturbed, it's very difficult to regain your equilibrium. And it is calculated by some persons to do that. Some persons are paid to do that. So while you're disturbing your equilibrium, persons are being rewarded for that, because that is how they feel that the current administration might lose favor from a lot of persons. As much as people think that the intention of the current administration is re-electability, the intention of those who are not in office is electability. So re-electability, you're campaigning and you're doing what you have to do to impress the people, express and bring them the optimum degree of satisfaction. But electability now, the reverse is true. You try to prove that the current administration is not doing what they're supposed to do and try to win some people over from them and stop some from going over to them. But the reality is we got to use what we have. We got to do our best until better can be done. And I will stop there for this evening. Next week I'm hoping to have, I think, Sandra Adderton. She should be coming here with me and we'll discuss a few topics. And I will inform you timely as to what next week Thursday would bring. I wish everybody the best of what is left of Thursday, the 16th of May, and hope that your listening of this program would have brought you some information and it might have been transformative, instructive, and soothing to your overall soul. Thank you. Good night.
The opinions and statements made by the host and participants in this program are not those of the owners, advertisers, and management company of Sugar City FM 90.3, nor are such statements necessarily supported or endorsed by the owners, managers, or advertisers of this station. While we encourage all to share their opinions, we do not support any comments that may slander, discriminate, or otherwise offend anyone, and we insist that you refrain from any such statements.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar City 90.3 for Fear No Favor.